Hey, Alice, Professor McCurdy. We are talking about the special senses in Anatomy and Physiology, Chapter 17. And in this video, we want to talk about the accessory structures of the eye, right? We are continuing with a series of videos on vision. Um, and before we get to the structure of the eye itself, there's all these things surrounding your eye that we want to talk about. So in the first slide, we're going to talk about sort of basic eye structure. A lot of this, you, a lot of this you probably already know, right? I don't think I have to explain what an eyebrow is or an eyelash. These are hairs that help prevent sweat and dust from getting into the eye. The parts of the eye that you can see, um, this pigmented portion of the eye is the iris. We'll talk more about that later. The purpose of the iris is to um, control the diameter of the pupil. That's the hole that that light passes through. Um, the white part of the eye is called the sclera. There's some structures that you can't really see. So covering the iris and the pupil is a clear structure called the cornea that we'll talk about. Um, and covering the cornea and the sclera is a mucous membrane known as the conjunctiva, also known as the conjunctiva, depending on who you ask. Um, the eyelids are known as the palpebrae, or the palpebra singular. Um, this is the palpebral fissure, the opening of the eye, and this little area right here, this is the lacrimal cranuncle. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Um, in the medial uh, commissure. I guess on the other side we have the lateral commissure. So just some basic terminology about the eye. Um, moving along, um, the eye, as you probably know, you can move your eye. You can like look at different things. Turns out you can actually rotate your eye in all three um, dimensions in all three directions. So, if you can imagine like a three-dimensional object, there's three axes that you can rotate about. If you're into like planes and space, you might know pitch, roll, and yaw. You might have heard of those words. But basically, each axis, you can move your eye in two directions, right? So you need two muscles for each dimension, meaning you have a total of six extrinsic muscles of the eye that help orient your eye in space. So the ones that allow you to look up, down, medially, and laterally, these are known as the rectus muscles. You have one on top, that's the superior rectus, right? You got one on the bottom, that's the inferior rectus. These allow you to look up and down. Uh, the medial rectus allows you to look medially. So like when you cross your eyes, you're contracting both medial rectus muscles at the same time. And then the lateral rectus allows you to abduct your eye. You can't really abduct your eye more than just like looking straight ahead. At least I don't know anyone that can do that. Your lateral rectus is also involved in a reflex that allows, basically there's this. It's really cool actually. There's a neuronal pathway in your brainstem where when you contract the lateral rectus on one side, you also contract the medial rectus on the opposite eye. Basically, you look right and left. Yeah, so the rectus muscles, up, down, left, and right. Then you've got these muscles that attach um, obliquely or kind of like this way. These muscles are going to spin the eye. Believe it or not, you can spin your eyes like this or like that. This guy did a YouTube video on it where we attached a camera in front of his face and recorded it. It was kind of cool. This one down here is known as the inferior oblique. Right, these muscles are known as oblique muscles. And then up on top, this one's kind of weird. The actual muscle kind of mimics a rectus muscle in that it goes straight back. But then the tendon loops through this little bit of tissue called the trochlea. Trochlea means pulley, and this is acting as a pulley, the tendon then attaches to the eye kind of obliquely, and that sort of pulls the eye in sort of this. I guess whether it's counterclockwise or clockwise depends on the eye. Um, I don't know if you'd call that medial rotation. I guess you'd call that medial rotation of the eye. So anyway, yeah, these nerves are controlled by, or sorry, these muscles are controlled by cranial nerves. You may remember the oculomotor. I think there's two C's in oculomotor. Oculomotor nerve, the trochlear nerve, and the abducens nerve. Take a second and guess which one, or see if you can remember which nerves these are. These are nerves 3, 4, and 6. The mnemonic, remember, is 3, 4, and 6 make the eyes do tricks. The oculomotor nerve is doing all the heavy lifting. All right, this is the one that innervates the superior rectus, the inferior rectus, the medial rectus, the inferior oblique. There's also another muscle, I'll mention it, it's on the next slide. Just above your superior rectus is a muscle called the levator palpebrae superioris. And if you remember from a couple minutes ago, I told you the word palpebrae means eyelid. So this is the one that lifts the top eyelid. In other words, it opens your eyes. So I'll just abbreviate that, levator palpebrae superioris. Also, there's a autonomic ganglia that we talked about in chapter 15, innervated by the oculomotor nerve. The trochlear nerve innervates a single muscle, just the superior oblique. It's the smallest cranial nerve. Yeah, named, I believe it passes through the trochlea. Trochlea, remember, pulley associated with the superior oblique muscle. The abducens, as we learned, abducts the eye because it innervates the lateral rectus. I didn't know where to fit it in, but I wanted to talk very briefly about the eyelids. Right, you've got sort of in your eyelids, you've got sort of a like a tarsal plate that gives structure to the eyelid. You also have these tarsal glands. They secrete a substance that keeps the eyelids from sticking to one another. The conjunctiva or conjunctiva kind of loops back onto the inner surface of the eyelid to help keep it moist and keep it from sticking to the eye. The lacrimal apparatus. So, as I've probably mentioned a few times in the course, the word lacrimal relates to tears. Your eyes are moist, right? And they're on the outside. And bacteria love moist places, right? They love to grow in moist places. That's why your skin is dry, to inhibit bacterial growth, amongst other reasons. So the tears, not only do they have to keep the eye moist, but they also have to wash away and inhibit bacterial growth. So tears are actually at a very slow rate, constantly flowing across your eye. They're kind of pushed across the eye as you blink, as you look around. Tears, they're mostly water. They contain some ions to keep it, isotonic, like mostly sodium and chloride. And it contains an important substance called lysozyme. Lysozyme, it's a very specific enzyme that breaks the chemical bonds that hold bacterial cell walls together. You'll hopefully learn more about it in microbiology when you talk about the structure of peptidoglycan and things like gram-negative, gram-positive bacteria. But tears are produced by the lacrimal glands. These are located in sort of the upper lateral, I guess I should say superior lateral corner of the orbit. The excretory lacrimal ducts empty the tears into the eye. As I mentioned, they wash across the surface of the eye and into the superior inferior lacrimal uh, canaliculus, which then drains the tears into your nose via the excretory lacrimal sac and the excretory nasolacrimal duct. I often just say nasolacrimal duct. Basically, below your inferior nasal concha, there's a little hole, um, and the tears flow into there, into that hole, into your nasal cavity, where they can either run down out of your nose or down the back of your throat, or just kind of moisten the nasal mucosa as it dries. Now, you may have noticed that when you cry, right? Crying is it's an emotional display where you increase lacrimal secretion so that tears are falling out of the eye. Um, you may have noticed that when you cry, your nose also runs. I used to think that was because this increased production of tears was kind of draining into your nose. I now know that it more has to do with the fact that the facial nerve is the nerve that innervates the lacrimal gland. It's also the nerve that innervates glands in the nasal mucosa. So basically, I guess when parasympathetic innervation hits this facial nerve, you produce increased lacrimal secretion. You also produce increased uh, serous secretions or mucus secretions in your nose. Um, Increased secretions of the nasal mucosa, which run out your nose. Yeah, so I think that's it as far as accessory structures. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the structure of the eye itself.